I'm Daniel Struiwig, and welcome to the first episode of Companies of Cape Town, a podcast that gives founders and leaders a chance to tell the stories of their businesses, from founding and funding to scaling and flourishing. It's an opportunity to look under the hood of high-performance companies and see what makes their leaders tick. Today we're talking with Rael Levitt, founder and CEO of Inospace. Today we have Rael from Inospace with us in Companies of Cape Town. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm intrigued by this journey of yours. Obviously a background starting from the auction industry, and as I understand you were quite a big player in that space, and somehow you've ended up as the founder and CEO of the largest last mile warehousing and storehouse group in the country. You also wrote a book, It Takes a Tsunami, Knocked Down but Not Gone, Lessons in Catastrophe and Tenacity. Catastrophe and tenacity. I suppose that's a life lesson and a business lesson and everything all in one. But something interesting from the book is that you mentioned that there were essentially these two major tsunamis in your life. The one was on Boxing Day 2004, when you were on the island of Phuket, and you managed to survive that one. And then in 2012, a tsunami of a different kind on the business side within the auction industry. And then somehow you managed to pull yourself towards yourself and get back up and whittle your way towards founding Inospace. And that must have taken some tenacity to get over the catastrophe, I'm guessing. And I'd like to hear more about that journey of picking yourself up.
Yeah, well, look, I've written a whole book about it, but I'll try and summarize the story. It's pretty well known. And in essence, I'd started in the auction industry while I was at university at UCT, and it went through its various iterations. But by 2011, it was certainly the largest auctioneer in South Africa, in many ways probably the largest auction company that South Africa has ever seen, either before or after, with billions of rands worth of sales. And then all of a sudden, one day, it literally disappeared overnight. I was accused at an auction of inflating the price. It was for a winery which was selling in Stellenbosch, and it became a huge media story which evolved into a long investigation. And at that stage, I decided really just to shut down the business, which was quite a dramatic decision. Obviously, when you look back, I often wonder if it was the right decision, but it was the decision which I made at that time. And of course, like all these things in our lives, difficult circumstances actually can evolve into great outcomes. And I suppose in essence, that's what happened. So the Auction Alliance business, with hundreds of people, with branches all around the country, literally came to a shuddering halt in around about March of 2012.
Yeah, that sounds like a tsunami.
Yeah, it was pretty much, it was a business tsunami. I had been, as you mentioned, in the actual tsunami, the most well-known tsunami, which was a tsunami.
I recall the day.
In Southeast Asia. You mentioned it was on Boxing Day. And I had survived that. And so the book is really just a metaphor of surviving these sort of difficult, unforeseen circumstances. But really to get back to the question of how it evolved into Inospace was a long journey, and it was arduous, and it was tough, and it was extremely difficult, and I had to dig deep into really being very focused on an outcome. But I suppose in summary, I really didn't know what to do with my life. I felt sorry for myself for quite a bit of time. And then I decided to be action orientated and to come up with a plan. And so I wrote myself a plan, a sort of 5-year plan. And of course, the best plans get interrupted by life.
As they do.
And I went to study. That was actually the first thing which I did. So I'd always wanted to continue my studies. I'd finished at UCT with an undergraduate degree, but I never had completed a postgrad. And I went to 2 universities. In fact, I became an academic of sorts for a while. I went to UCLA in California to do an executive MBA. And then there was a further program which I did in Singapore. And it was while I was actually in that period, it was about a 2-year period between 2014 and 2016, that I sort of had to puzzle out exactly what I wanted to be doing. And so my 5-year plan would say, I would say to myself, look, I wanted to do something which was innovative. I wanted to do something, again, in an industry which I knew, but I'd never had specifics. And so really the trigger to what became Inospace was looking at the great change in our time, which is technology, and how technology was going to be changing and impacting various industries. Now,
what
course,
the workplace looks like and what real estate looks like. And
exactly. What the workplace looks like, what real estate would look like, where it was going to, and what would be disruptive. And I suppose I'd done that in the auction business as well. I'd been a disruptor. I mean, in its end, it was very disruptive, but it was a disruptive business because it really changed and redefined the way auctions were conducted. And I can comfortably say that if I look back today, all the auctioneers in South Africa really used methodology which was created at Auction Alliance by myself and the team at that stage. And really the industry is pretty much static to what it was when we did great disruption in the auction industry. But now I was ready to disrupt a new industry. And so I looked at real estate, the different types of real estate. And in essence, if you look at real estate, it can go into sort of 4 categories. And the one is obviously residential, which most people know. And then, of course, there is offices and the office sector, there's retail and there's industrial. And then the last one would be the hotel sector, leisure. And so I really went and investigated, and actually we had lectures in California when I was there about the different sectors. And at that stage, retail was being disrupted because of the rise of Amazon. And the fact is that Amazon and Takealot and today the Chinese entrants, ShopRite 6060, has actually improved those businesses. But what it has changed, it was the nature that they use real estate. And so we all became used to it during COVID. It was like groceries could be delivered to my house. I didn't need to go into
voila,
it arrives. You click a button. We get our groceries now in within 60 minutes. We're used to it. People even demanding quicker time, and of course that disrupted shopping centers and retail shops, because the truth is you don't need to go into a Checker store to buy
a lot of your space, like what you get to ask for rent, is based on the number of feet. And if you have fewer feet because people get their stuff delivered, whatever it is.
Exactly. And a great example is, say, for example, food. So, you and I can go right now to any restaurant which we choose, but we can also get every restaurant to come to us. And that means that some people would prefer to eat at home and some people want to go out for the entertainment value. But it certainly changed real estate. And in 2015, when I was studying, I was looking, I was like, wow, this is really impacting in the United States, firstly, because obviously they're the leaders in technology. And it started impacting, you started getting the rise of like what they call dead malls. They were just dying. And people weren't going into shops any longer because they could get the shops to come to them. And I was like, okay, that's very interesting. Certainly if I'm going to do anything, I don't want to do it in that space because it's disruptive and it would be difficult to compete. Offices, I was always certain on. To me, offices was a little bit obvious because at the end of the day, people go into an office to do an administrative task. And, just even with a personal computer or with your smartphone, a lot of those personal tasks can be done at home. It can be done actually at a coffee shop. It can be done at the gym. It can be done anywhere. And so I knew offices were going to be disrupted. I didn't look at hotels, which have actually post-COVID actually experienced an enormous boom because people want to travel. And residential, again, I wasn't interested in, although residential is interesting because there's not necessarily be a pill today where you don't have to go sleep at a place and shower and have children and bring up kids, etc. But the one area I thought was interesting was actually this sort of logistics and warehousing, because every good known to man needs to go through some form of warehousing. Unless you are having a 3D printer in your lounge and you can build.
Yeah, there must be didistribution
correct.
It can't just travel from the factory straight to someone's house.
Correct. Or from, I often look at my jersey and I thought to myself, well, how many warehouses has this jersey been until it becomes a final product which I'm wearing? And I would guess probably between 10 and 20, because it's the place where if it's cotton, where the cotton was picked, it goes into a warehouse, and where it's sorted, it goes into a warehouse, and if it's exported, it goes into another warehouse. And the color and the dye and the buttons and the cotton and all the components which would make up just a simple shirt would go through multiple warehouses. So I thought, well, that's actually a very interesting space. And so while I was still traveling backwards and forwards then to Singapore to do a further degree, somebody came to me one day and they said, look, they've got a building for sale in Epping in Cape Town. And I looked at it and I thought,
this sort of industria.
Right? Yeah, it was a good old-fashioned, built in the 1950s, I think, old industrial, dirty building. It was industrial. And so the first thing I decided, well, that's a very interesting sector for multiple reasons. And the one is obviously because of technology. Secondly, actually, it was always like the very poor cousin of real estate. It wasn't sexy. It was sexy to have your name emblazoned on the top of a building in an office block in town. It was like really sexy to have a cool shopping center with stuff in it, and offices and hotels. But industrial was like the boring, really back. It was like guys who owned industrial, like mechanics.
Yeah, but I mean, Epping is actually a good location. In terms of it's like where it sits, of course, in the Western Cape, right?
Of course, and it's not only, I mean, all industrial, sort of historic industrial areas, both in South Africa and globally, were always situated very well because they were very well located, because they were near airports, they were near roads, they were near where labor is, because they needed to get distribution out. And so the dirty, old, dark, scruffy industrial areas of old actually were in these incredible locations right on the urban edge, which is actually the model was to go to buy these old buildings. I liked brand because I'd been looking at various companies and I'd always been brand orientated. And we created really like quite innovative product in terms of creating much smaller spaces. And much smaller spaces meant that people would actually pay a higher rate. And so in 2017, Inospace was born with one building in Epping. Correct. And we put in meeting rooms, we put in cool things which weren't like ground-shattering differences, but they'd always been done in other areas. But in industrial, it was like, wow, this is highly different, highly innovative. And so it was born. I bought one building. It was when Auction Alliance had shut down, it wasn't a financial bankruptcy. It was really actually just a media scandal. And
you were acquitted at legal terms.
Well, I wasn't even acquitted because I was never charged.
So you're just judged by media.
Yeah, It was a court case in one or two publications of the newspaper, and of course, in the world, we certainly know today, in the world of media, there's a scandal a minute. So actually, in a way, I think the world has changed in the sort of Donald Trump era. But I was never actually charged with anything. I was really just charged in the public opinion and by journalists. I mean, you're probably too young to remember journalists in newspapers, but it was right at the end of that. I mean, today it's all irrelevant because today we watch TikTok and anyone is a journalist. And so, people don't take it that seriously. A lot of people took this thing very, very seriously, including the banks. But
Investec this is a reputational thing.
It was reputational.
The banks and whoever else you're associated with, death by association for them, they've got to withdraw. Exactly.
And so, I mean, I didn't even try, but yes, I got an indication from the sort of the banks. In Investec Bank, and I always mention their name because they were like, listen, if you're charged with something and found guilty, we won't fund you, but we will actually support you. And they really did. I bought another building, and I was growing the business, and then all of a sudden another article appeared from the same journalist who'd been sort of launched it, and then I had been involved with a very large investor, an offshore investor in previous in business, and he said he would back me. And so literally up to COVID, I went from 0 to R1 billion in assets here in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg, and the business grew at COVID. And of course, when COVID arrived, it was a tsunami for the entire world. Except for me now, this is my third tsunami. And so
you're ready to surf the wave?
Oh yes, I mean when COVID arrived, it was like I actually couldn't. Well, I couldn't actually believe that, in my opinion, that governments would be so stupid and just lock down the economy. Yeah, it was crazy stuff. In fact, I truly think actually everyone needs to sit down as a society and go back and say, like, what did we get wrong? And that mass panic. And of course, a medical panic makes people even more panicky. But me, I was the total opposite. I was cool soos komkommer, and I thought, wow, there's going to be opportunity, which it was, both for Inospace. We literally just at that COVID point, we doubled the business. We went from R1 billion to over R2 billion. I did a very large transaction. with Fortress REIT, and it doubled the size of the business. And it went from a billion rand company to about a 2.5 billion rand company. It just so happened at the time I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he was launching an airline, and I got involved actually as a partner in Lift Airlines. And so I actually did two things in COVID. Looking back, my big mistake was I should have done much more. I don't know if I had enough balls during COVID. I should have had bigger balls. I mean, I was ballsy because I doubled the business. I never spent a day at home.
Also, everyone else is terrified.
Oh, they were terrified.
Trying to offload.
Yes, of course. Everybody thought that we were all going to die and they're going to bury us in the parking lots of industrial buildings out in Epping. But I knew it would pass because these things, because I'd been in I'd been in a tsunami when I ran away from a wave and you survive. And then I'd been in this really, actually, probably more difficult for me, the second tsunami, and you survive and you come out better too. And it's like when the third one hit, and I looked at it and I said, okay, here's opportunity. And we all know every single human being goes through some form of difficulty or tsunami. And so I said, okay, let's go up for the challenge. And so that's really the story of Inospace and its background.
No, it's amazing. It's like surfs up, right?
Surfs up, and like it was. In fact, recently I was in a talk, and they said to me, there were all these like surfers talking about how they run into the waves and big great surf. And I said, look, the one thing I learned as opposed to surfers, when a big wave comes, just run. And so, I ran, but I didn't run into the wave. I ran away from the wave.
So, in terms of Inospace, I think you've touched on a whole bunch of things there. I'd be interested to know more about the genesis, sort of the moment, and I've read about this somewhere, so I'm sort of trying to draw this out of you, right? But at what point did you say industrial space, yes, that makes sense, let's buy it, to let's do something different in terms of the amenities, and you were saying meeting rooms and whatever else in an industrial area?
Well, I mean, for me, generally, innovation is always about trying things, and trying things differently to what everybody else does. I think it's probably very much part of my nature to question things and go, is this the way it should be? Is there a better way? Can we try alternative things? I also think being South African is actually very cool because we live here at the bottom tip of Africa. A lot of big companies, we think we're big, but we're not that big. They're not that interested. And so you can look around the rest of the world and you go, well, what's working in the UK and what's working in the United States and what's working in Asia. And see those trends. And so I actually did that. I hopped on a plane. I went to Germany. I looked at it and I thought, if it could work in Germany, could we South Africanize this? Bearing in mind, I'd done the exact same thing in the auction business. I mean, Auction Alliance was very innovative, but I went to Australia and I looked at Australia. It was a great auction country. I went to America, so our auctions worked in America. I went to the UK. Today, you don't need to physically go there. You can just go look on your phone and you go look on TikTok or how it works. But at that stage, I jumped on the plane. I went to Germany. I looked at a model of a business which I thought could really work and to emulate it. And so it was imitate and innovate. What's the moment when I thought this is going to work? Well, I said, let's try certain things. And so we tried the smaller products. It worked. I wasn't quite sure about the brand, but I thought it should work in South Africa, and all the various things which we tried. Certain things I tried didn't work actually, but the nub of the business did work. And of course, luck is a great thing in life. And people always say you make your own luck. I'm not so sure. I think sometimes luck just arrives because of the moment in time. So again, COVID was good luck for me. But
also you already had this attitude of how to approach what seemed like a catastrophe. You already knew that, well,
yes,
I have a playbook for this.
Yeah, I have a playbook for this, and I think we inherently all know deep down, unless you die, that's difficult. But we all deep down know that in difficult times we can actually turn things around. Even right now, I'm even in South Africa. I'm looking at Johannesburg, and everybody, Cape Town is like the Las Vegas of Africa. But actually, I'm looking at saying maybe let's be different, and isn't Johannesburg a bigger opportunity? And to be, we all know the Warren Buffett quote: when everybody's running in one direction, you should be running in the other. When everybody's panicky. And in a crisis, you should be calm. And so I do see it that way. And so
Charlie Munger wisdom coming through.
Absolutely.
The Oracle of Omaha was just channeling him.
Exactly. So, I think that I realized, on the first one, it was actually a great success. And I thought, okay, this is something that can work. And this is something which ticks that book, which I'd written to myself. I want to do something innovative. I want to do something which is disruptive, something which is different, and something which can grow. And so when it started working, I just went for it. I put the foot down on the accelerator and said, right, found something here.
So for someone who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about,
yes,
it's an industrial space, and you have some amenities. Like what exactly does Inospace do? And I'm sure that it also started at some point as this is what we do that is different from the kind of offerings you'll find around.
yes.
And across time it evolved, like you said, maybe made some mistakes along the way, but how it evolved to where it is now.
So I mean, Inospace is an owner and an operator of warehouses. And so we create warehouses which are really look at the range of businesses, but essentially focuses on smaller warehousing, and which makes it quite sexy today because it's what they call last mile warehousing, which is the last mile to the customer. And what we do differently is that we believe in space as a service. I mean, we're not the only ones who believe in it, but space as a service, pretty much like a hotel would be. I mean, if you think of a hotel, it's just a piece of real estate which you're renting per night.
You don't have to bring your own toothpaste. You don't have to bring
exactly.
it. Like
Correct. And they give you a range of services. They can give you food, they can give you Wi-Fi, they can give you a range of services. And so historically, real estate wasn't seen like that outside of hotels. I mean, real estate was really, look, here's my space, take the lease, don't talk to us, take a long-term period, and good luck, brew, and don't come complain to us. And if you do, let's try and limit these complaints, and don't pay me late. And that was basically real estate. And so I knew the sort of space as a service was changing because consumers were changing. And that's sort of the big thing with Inospace is a couple of things. It's small, it's serviced. We don't believe in landlordism where it's like, read the hand and read the contract. It's like, really, can we actually accommodate businesses and be flexible? And then it's what solutions outside of traditional real estate, outside of like, the bricks and the mortar, can we give businesses which they can use, which can make their lives easier? And that is essentially Inospace. I mean, it's also branded, which is not that common in South Africa. We don't walk into shopping centers and say, look, I'm going to such and such a shopping center. I looked at other examples in the world where it was branded. We do have some branded real estate in South Africa, but it's branded, it's recognizable, it's repeat customer, and it sits in a very interesting space.
It's interesting how you're saying it's not something that's common specifically within an industrial area, so to have a recognizable name, but it means that in time you can grow this reputation. It also means that you've got these additional, and I think it goes with the times. Someone they don't want to deal with whatever else, janitorial stuff or someone with a kitchen or a tea lady or whatever. I have a specialty business, or it's just warehousing. It's just for logistics. In terms of your current position in South Africa for real estate and logistics, where would you put yourself?
Well, great question.
I mean, if you put yourself number one, that's fine, but I don't know, like, what percentage ahead of number two?
Well, we are number one because there is no number two. So we are in our direct space, we have no competition in South Africa, and of course we have indirect. We have lots of indirect competition. Every warehouse which is in an area, we have big industrial areas in South Africa. One mustn't forget South Africa's 55 million people, and those people need clothing, they need food, they need goods, they need physical product, and so in every industrial there is the indirect competition. Directly, we're new and we're different, and we don't have a direct competitor. And so certainly if you're on a direct competition, we're number one, but we're also number 100, and we're first and we're last because we have no direct competition. And we've niched ourselves in this last mile logistics sector because actually, I mean, that is what warehouses are in South Africa, particularly today.
You might have a DC somewhere, but...
Well, there are. We've got lots of DCs. There are all the DCs, but you're talking about the very big DCs, which, the ShopRite and the Take-A-Lot and the big ones. So we don't do that. And so there are some there's in fact only one specialized fund in South Africa which does that, which is called Equitas. And there are lots of the other big property groups, such as the Redefines and the Growth Points. They do. have one of their divisions, or sometimes a larger division. I mean, our partners in Fortress are another one as well, where they have where they want to do the DCs, but we do the small DCs for SMEs and smaller businesses. And so, we're pretty large. In sort of in the JSE terms, we actually small. So, Inospace today is about a 3 billion rand fund. That would be regarded as pretty small on the JSE, really actually small, as opposed to these big listed groups.
What's the squeeze per drop of juice, right? Like, how many people do you have? And so, like, how profitable are you actually compared to a lot of some of the bigger guys who might be running bare bones?
We're a private fund. I mean, it is obviously a very profitable business, and in terms of sort of turnover, we'd on JSE terms we'd be quite small if we're comparing it to other companies. But again, on direct competition, we're there. In terms of like a private company, I suppose we're pretty large. They're not, to grow these sort of businesses, you need major capital. You can't build
a fund.
Exactly, and so what really happens is that they're all different formats, but a lot of these companies are listed. They're listed as REITs, and they can raise large capital. For us, we don't have the luxury of doing that, but then we also have the ability to be much more nimble, much more fast, much quicker, and we don't have to go answer to a whole range of shareholders at shareholders meetings. So it's got its pros and cons, but certainly as a private company, we're pretty large.
Have you ever considered tokenizing as a fund?
These are questions which I answer every day. So obviously we've thought about it for a while, and whether we should be sort of following the more traditional capital raising route, which would be going to list on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And I've had a lot of approaches actually recently about tokenization. Whether it's an alternative channel to do it. And to answer the question is, I've actually looked at it and I haven't gone into great depth into it, but possibly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way to go. And I know BlackRock was saying that they predict the future was Larry Fink who said he predicts that all funds in the future will be tokenized. And a bunch of them are, and some aren't. But I suppose it is an interesting space.
It hasn't been done in South Africa yet, and I know it hasn't really been done globally on a big property fund level. Sorry, but we're living in a world of rapid change. It's maybe something I don't.
We might talk about it afterwards.
Okay, great. So I've always got an open eye, because I can't sit here and say innovation space or Inospace is our name and not be innovative even on cap raising. And so it is something that we would keep an eye on and see. Could it work for us?
And so, I mean, like you said, Inospace, innovation is in the name.
Yes.
You don't currently have direct competition because I think you've just moved too quickly and no one's sort of caught up. But at some point, obviously, it being a free market, unless you have a form of regulatory capture or something, someone else must wake up to it and say, well, we're also gonna try. And what in such an environment, and it's almost good to just imagine a hypothetical upstart who's going to try and chase you down. What do you do to make sure you maintain the edge and that your innovation?
Sure, great question. I mean, I actually do think that businesses that don't have any direct competition are at risk, and including Inospace, because that makes you lazy. It makes you, you can't, you're running a race and you're not competing against somebody. You're in a sports game and you don't know what the score is. So I actually do think it's actually important to have competitors. I don't know. Where there is honey, there are bees, and certainly
it's difficult to run from the tsunami if there's no wave.
Yeah, true. I mean, that is true, and it's difficult to run a race and know who wins when no one's timing you. So I think there should be competition. I've seen one or two of the large storage groups sort of veer into our space, and we're veering into their space, and so that may happen. I do think there's a very fine line actually between small warehouses and what is known in South Africa as self-storage. And so there may be a merging of that, and that's where we're going to start seeing competition. It's possible. But again, I don't want to be arrogant and say we don't have competition. We have a lot of competition. We just have them in different pockets, but not direct.
So in terms of unexpected challenges that you face in a space. So let's say it's not quite tsunamis, but maybe spring tide, high tide, a big old wave,
Yes.
as I'm sure you've had many of. How do you, if we can take an example or two, perhaps, how did you face that and overcome that? And do you sort of have a set of principles? Because I know you've got the 18 principles in the book, right? Do you sort of use a set of principles like that, or those ones specifically, to address what that challenge looks like, and then figure
Sure.
out how to?
Yeah, I mean, in the book, actually, it was when I was writing the book, I was thinking, should I be giving business lessons? And I thought, well, maybe it's a bit, maybe it's a bit arrogant. The book is really about actually facing disaster and dealing with the head on. So I honed in on that. Those 18 principles is really actually how to deal with a tsunami or difficult circumstances, something which comes out of the blue. And often actually people read it and they don't even use it in business, they use it in life. Whether it's a divorce, a death, a problem,
Catastrophes
a catastrophe, and as again, they happen to everyone. So for me, actually, the question you're really asking is a question of risk and how do you deal with risk. Now, bearing in mind that we're a new business and we have to be much more risky than other companies, because, just starting a business is high risk. And we not only do we have high risk, but we buy buildings, we convert them. And so, of course, risk lurks around every corner. For me, it's about, there's a couple of things, and it's actually a couple of business principles. Outside of those 18 sort of, risk mitigation when a crisis comes. But for me, the first is really to have like a set of values in our business, and, what do we believe in? And
First rule, don't panic.
the first rule, the first rule is to don't panic, and the second rule is to have a good team to deal with it, and to really to view excellence. I think one has to be constantly measuring, and then a lot of people bullshit themselves actually that it's great and we're good, and then circumstances around you change, and risk does come in every format. I mean, it's interesting as human beings because we actually all don't believe that bad things are going to happen. We only think
No, we believe they'll happen, but not to us.
Not to us, exactly. Correct. It always happens to the next person. And I think that's an inherent positivity and optimism in human nature. I think it's great. I mean, there are some people who just think all bad things are going to happen, but they're sort of manic depressives. But I think for most people, actually, believe positive things will happen. I think real estate's also interesting because property people, by their very nature, are very optimistic. I mean, and believe it will always go right. I suppose the greatest example of a property person is the President of the United States. He's a property person. And so, property people actually are inventive and they build and they leave their signature on the horizon. And so they're nature
they're not sitting with the
optimistic.
liquidity ready to run out of the country. They're
Correct,
actually
because
putting
it's
it
fixed.
out.
Correct, good point. I mean, it's fixed in the ground, and so therefore they do have to think long term. It's not a piece of software.
And you need that positivity, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. And so there is a positivity, but I mean, risk can come in any format actually. And the traditional ones we know about, there's interest rates could blow out. You've got political risk. You've got when you're converting buildings, you've got risk in terms of just risk on actually project risk. So risk comes in all different areas, and so we constantly look at that risk. And truth be told, I mean, we've refined the model. I think the biggest risk actually was and still remains actually moving from a very small business into a mid-sized business and then to a large business, because the skill set that the business requires has to change. When you start a business, it's a very different operation to when you're starting to now what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, thousands of tenants, collecting rentals at mass speed, rolling out businesses rolling out new buildings on a regular basis. It changes, and I suppose probably the biggest risk, and particularly for somebody like me, is to go, am I keeping up with what the business now requires? Was the skill set that we as a company had and I as an individual had in the beginning, is that the skill set which is required today? And I can tell you now, it rapidly changes, and the team needs to change, and our people need to change, our systems need to change. We need to look at how we create technology and see to it that you're up with it and you've got the ability to deal with this sort of volume.
To your point of scaling, but also to your point in a time of crisis, you said that one of the most important things is to have good people around you. And I think to have good people around you, as the business leader, you create a lot of how you are and what you've experienced and so on, creates a base layer for the culture of an organization. But with that, also specific decisions that you make.
Yeah.
And would you say today, for where, let's say, Inospace, in terms of culture, is at a certain place, and in your wildest, most ideal dreams, you would have it in a slightly different place? What is that delta?
Yeah, I mean, like for me, there is no point where you go, I've arrived. I think
There's no perfection.
Yeah, and I think people who see that get arrogant, and I often look back and I go, maybe I was arrogant actually, even in the auction space, because we were big, we were 60% of the market. It was quite a similar story in a way. I mean,
just guns blazing.
Well, it's guns blazing, and I think actually when a business gets really to that point, you can get tripped up, which happened to me, and I never look back at that what happened at that point and go, I wasn't to blame, blame everybody else. I'm going, no, you're the leader, you accept accountability for what happened, and then actually learn from one's mistakes. And so I think that in terms of culture, I do think founder-led businesses, the culture is created by the regional founders, and it is the leader to see to it that a culture remains in the business. I think that many of the things which I believe are set in the culture of the business. I mean, I suppose I was lucky in a way because I started a new business from scratch, but I had 20 years experience of dealing with difficult circumstances and drama and people and systems and scaling up similar stories. So for me, it was actually a second round at doing the same thing. And somebody said to me, look, you're going to fuck up on your first time.
I know.
And I said, I know, trust me, I know. And then they said, look, I mean, if you make the same mistakes, then just see to it that you don't make the next set of fuck ups. But trust me, you'll find new ones. And so, I mean, that's clearly what can happen and has happened. But coming back to the issue of culture, I'm a big believer in articulating that culture in words and saying, like, what is culture? What do we believe in as an organization? What do I believe in as a founder? I think the real difficult part is to see to it that everybody else believes in it, because they say they believe in it, and you can put it up as many times as you want on the wall.
But also, do you believe in it, right?
Well, correct. I mean,
because ultimately, leading by example is, it's fine if you have principles, but if people can see you don't work by them, you don't operate by them, then
of course.
Oh, these are just slogans we put on the walls.
Exactly. If it's some bullshitty slogan that's on the wall because you read it on ChatGPT or Grok and you just say, oh, this sounds cool, and we're going to put it on the wall, and then either you as a founder or as the leader and founder or other people don't live to those principles, and they are just a bunch of bullshit words on a wall which are completely meaningless. And so I think that's for me the big issue in culture is to see to that you actually live by it, and in whatever you do, and whatever those set of values are.
So, I mean, you're saying that the business is obviously, and that is one of the biggest risks and one of the biggest challenges, is the rapidity of your growth. And I imagine in terms of that, and you mentioned that things need to change because it's different. But you also don't want, there's certain very important things in the culture that's working, that's allowing the business to be where it is, and it has allowed it to come to where it is, and you want to make sure that you maintain those. And I suppose it's a risk if you try to grow too quickly, that you don't get the time to impart the necessary culture on.
True, and we make
and also culture, but also processes, processes and.
Well, I mean, systems and process, I mean, those are absolutely critical. And for somebody like me, actually, probably a good thing is that I actually don't sit there and think of this as being an area which I should actually. And so I've built a lot of people around me now who are much more process orientated. And in the early days, it was like go people. It's like, come guys, let's just do things, and we'll build the airplane and get it up flying. And when we're in the air, let's just see that this thing doesn't crash. And so, and that's a nice skill to have. And I still have that. I'm very much always pushing on the edge, and it's like, I mean, if you want to ask me, it's like being quite ballsy. and saying like, let's do stuff and let's take the bigger risk. Of course, now the plane is flying and there are passengers on board. So I think the biggest risk is to say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the plane. We're not quite sure where we're going. We're not quite sure where we're landing there. We're not sure if you have enough fuel. We're not sure exactly
if we can actually land.
If we can even land. But anyway, just come along on the plane and trust. And I think in the early days you can do that. You attract a certain type of individual who likes it, and then it becomes more about actually having people say, okay, I've done this before. This is now about repetitive systems and process, and to see that you constantly do that. As an individual, for me, probably the biggest issue actually is something which I deeply believe in both personally and in the business, and is one of the values of our business, and that is to constantly be learning and reinventing and improving and seeing what's going on in the world, and really understanding actually how you can actually improve both as a person and as a company.
If I arrived at Inospace, what would I expect in terms of culture?
I mean, I think that it's actually got quite a youthful culture. I mean, I was looking around the room the other day, even in our very senior leadership team. I was like, I'm pretty old next to them. So there's definitely a young, energetic culture. It's quite go, go, go. Speed is very much part of the culture. It's also got the ability to, we have a lot of conversation, a lot of discussions inside at Inospace. It's non-hierarchical. I think that it's pretty much actually even the way we sit, the way we operate. There's not this like very strict hierarchy. There's not dear sir. I think culture's built up on many things. It's language, it's dress. I mean, even the language. It's quite an open culture, so people can express what they feel, and even sometimes people, they say, "Oh, I can," but they don't. But you can, and so I think it really is. It's a high energy culture. It's quite, focused on what Inospace is about and actually being innovative. So I think those are the cultural things. And it's interesting in businesses what happens as they get bigger. The big challenge is to see the culture is the same everywhere. So you asked if you walked in Inospace. I mean, my question is which Inospace? If you walked into Cape Town, it would have a slightly different culture to Joburg. Often think that Joburg versus Cape Town, to me, maybe Joburg, they're a little bit more fun, they have a lach. I try to bring that to the Cape Townians, are more like, we Cape Townians, we're cool, we have coffee and cappuccinos, and we climb mountains and we get stoned and take magic mushrooms. I think that is more of a Cape Town thing. I think at our branches, bearing in mind, we've got over 50 sites, and so that is a culture over there as well. Hopefully we're expressing it, and it's something which we constantly need to work on.
So what is your biggest project for the next 5 years?
I mean, we sat down as a business and actually worked in the 5-year cycles of the business. And so quite interestingly, the business reached 5 years in 2022. And so 2027 would be the next 5-year period. So we're heading into 2026. We're at the end of the 5-year cycle. I think the big project actually is to grow and to open up new Inospaces. And we really do want to double the business in the next 3 years, not in 5 years, to grow our sites, to grow the technology. We really have a very well articulated 12-point plan actually to do it. But it's certainly actually to grow our number of sites and to grow our smaller sites and to become the home of SMEs in this last mile logistics space. And growth is very much actually part of it. It's a doubling and a minimum of doubling. And I mentioned numbers before. That's are you going to double? But it's very possible. I mean, if we doubled Inospace, it would still make us on the smaller end on big property companies. And so that is a very clear focus for us to double. Obviously, using technology inside the business is a very clear strategy of ours. And how do we make it both for our customers and actually as internally to create and better our systems. And so those are our major challenges and our major focus. So it's quite clear. It's a scoreboard. You can literally measure it. It's you want to have a
double
goal.
in 3 years. Apply lots of technology.
I mean, behind that, there are lots of metrics, what we want our rate per square meter to be and all the metrics that one should have. And those, to me, if you want to have a game plan and you want to win the World Cup, it's got to be on the scoreboard. You've got to have those numbers and know what those are. And so, that is very much our strategy. So one of the projects which we're working on now and really over the 6 months is our first big building in the city to create a last mile logistics space there, to create warehousing and to create smaller spaces, which is the Exchange in Cape Town. It's in fact our biggest project to date. It's a building which is about 130 million rand building. It's going to have over 1,000 businesses in it. And more importantly, actually, it's going to be where we're going to move our head office. And to me, that particular project is representative of the new Inospace.
Moved out of Epping.
Moved
now
out of
we're
Epping.
in town.
We've always been in town, actually, but now it's like a big building on the foreshore with our big red circle over the horizon in Cape Town. And it's like, can we live up to that challenge? And so I've got my work cut out for me. It does give me sleepless nights and our team sleepless nights to roll out the Exchange as our flagship Inospace, the new Inospace, version 2.0.
So I think we've touched on the sector, and I think the trends are perhaps what you are busy setting, and sort of an imaginary competitor, for instance, coming into the space and what might happen, but also technological changes. For instance, AI, I'm sure within the logistics space, there's going to be disruption. Also hardware technologies that might come out in the next, let's say, 5 years or so. What do you see happening in the space, in the industry, within the sector? And then specifically for Inospace, do you anticipate specific changes at this point?
I mean, I think probably the biggest change where technology is rapidly improving, and that is, again, I go back to the sort of my jersey that I'm wearing and say, okay, will technology speed up the production cycle and the speed to customer? Will it speed? And there's no question about it. It will, because in the good old days, and even now, when you don't have great technology, people are storing. People buy goods, companies buy goods, they store them in warehouses, they distribute them through different channels, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's it's sort of directly to consumer, whether it's to other businesses. Now, when you really sort of understand the supply chain, and it's a much improved supply chain, it will speed it up, which actually literally would mean that goods don't need to sit in warehouses for that long. That's on the distribution side, because it's just speed. Everybody wants speed, and AI and technology is going to speed that up, and it will have an impact. Trust me, it will have an impact. It'll have an impact on big box warehousing, but it will also have a change actually right across in even actually in shops. So if you walk in, and you can actually literally see it. I mean, you can walk into a shop and you'll see, the same goods are sitting on the shelves, and that actually isn't an efficient use of space. And then you walk into another store, and the goods at the end of the day, everything's sold out, and that's actually more efficient use of space because they're moving goods quicker through. And so I think that would actually change the need for space. It would become smaller and smaller. E-commerce is changing it rapidly. I mean, I think in South Africa, I literally think we are still at the very early beginnings of online retail. It's early, and there's a war going on. There's a war, and 5 years is a long time in technology. I mean, the war
it is a very long time.
The war in South Africa is interesting because you've got a war to get goods to consumers quicker, cheaper, and better. And the first entrants in the war, the Chinese, they're in the game here, right in South Africa. Temu is here, Shein is here. They are moving goods, and government was even complaining about the other day because they're trying to protect local industry. But these oaks are here, and they're getting stuff cheaply to the consumer, and now they're going to get them faster to the consumer. The next war is your existing retailers, and Shoprite Checkers they're an impressive bunch in my view. You've got Woolies Dash, you've got Pick n Pay, ASAP. That is actually your traditional big box retailers now adopting channels. Walmart has now entered the fray in South Africa, so we've got like another big brother from the United States in the game.
But they're already here with Massmarts, right?
They are, but
you actually have Walmart itself.
Correct. But now it's branding as Walmart. The question is, are they going to follow the Walmart strategy? And the Walmart strategy is very much to create online marketplaces. It's not only to be, stores where people walk into. And then, of course, we've got the existing online retailers, which is Takealot, and they're also in the game. So you've really got this sort of like four-way competition. And of course, Amazon trying to compete with Takealot, absolutely. And even today I saw Amazon, I don't know if you saw that, Amazon today, or yesterday, sorry, said they're going to now create you can order when you want your goods arriving at your home, much like actually Checker 6060 does. And so that, puts pressure on it. And so there's this interesting aspect is going on in South Africa, and technology is where it's all happening. And so it's early days in technology. I mean, I suppose that the real issue actually is how does that affects your marketplace, because no, we can have the greatest business in town, we can be incredible, the best people, the best values, the best everything, but if the market goes against you because people don't want your product, you're basically screwed. So that's in the marketplace. So you got to watch that, and then of course you got to look internally and you go, what technology can make us more efficient, make us have the ability to speed up, make the ability to scale, make the ability to process better, and that is a rapid change as well. And so technology is just a huge factor in our business, both externally and internally.
So do you have, in terms of trying to future-proof, you can't future-proof yourself, but you have to always try, right? And
yes.
Do you have some kind of BHAG, what is that, big hairy ass
yes, we do.
goal too?
Correct. I mean, we do, and the one is for us to actually use technology to make the business more efficient, to make the business smarter, make the business actually less reliant on people's ability to move things from one side of the room to the other. I wrote an interesting article the other day about technology, because everybody thinks AI is going to just change the world, but and it will. I mean, there's no question about it. It will. But human beings are the greatest problem, because in essence, AI is just a tool in human hands, and the adoption of AI is difficult in a business that's got existing systems. But it's going to change. And so our big area goal is really actually to use technology, both for ourselves, but much more critically for our customers, who used to be called tenants, but our customers to actually operate their businesses better.
That sounds very exciting and terrifying. So what advice would you give to a youngster who wants to start up a business?
And I think the most critical thing in a business is to have the balls to begin. And many people actually don't have that, but lots of people do. And I think, once you've ticked that box...
Can you grow them?
Can you grow? Yeah, you can actually. I mean, strangely enough, a lot of people's risk appetite as they get older softens, because you've got stuff to lose. So I think that people can grow, and I do like to look at. There's a lot of examples in the world today of people who are actually in their 70s who actually develop great tenacity and great balls. So you can grow those. But the second thing for me in a business is cash flow. People always forget about cash flow, and you've got to have that ability to look at your cash flow today while seeing the opportunity for tomorrow. And so for me, that's very much about bringing cash in. I think my third piece of advice is about hard work. Now, this is, we live very much in an era and an age, and I really sound like an old man when I'm saying this, that people don't want to work hard. I truly believe that life and success belongs to the obsessed and the obsessive. I think that if whatever you want to be really good at, you become really good at, and you put in time and you put in obsession and you be thinking about it. If you want to be a great sportsman, a great rock star, a great porn star, whatever you want to do, you got to really become good at it and spend a lot of time on it. And when we live in a world where everybody believes in like balance, I believe we may well have a balance in life, because when we're young, we can chill out with our parents, and when we're old, we can chill out with our children and grandchildren. So there is balance. But if people think they're going to have this perfectly balanced day, I'm going to do yoga in the morning, I'm going to work for an hour in the afternoon, I'm going to play paddle with my friends, I'm going to go to the beach, I'm going to balance my dog, my children, my life. Like, you can do that, but then don't expect to be like brilliant at anything. And so in business, there are so many examples. I mean, do we think Elon Musk is obsessed? The
It's
answer
all
is yes.
obsession.
And we think is Steve Jobs obsessive? The answer is yes. And if we think of a great sports person, and they are obsessed. So people think, I mustn't be obsessed. A lot of younger people think, it's my friends told me don't be obsessed. You got to chill. I did an interview with somebody the other day, and they told me, I need a balance. I'm going, okay, well, we're not the company for you, but you can be balanced, but don't expect to be like particularly great at any of it. So I think that's a second, bit of advice. I think another bit of advice is like, experience is interesting. Experience can be an inhibitor as well. So be open-minded and open to learning. I think arrogance is a huge problem as individuals, because we think we're good. And we live again in an era where even if we don't think we're good, we have to tell everybody we're good. And that's why TikTok and Instagram and Facebook exist, because I'm amazing. And when you start buying your own bullshit, you're buying
your own Kool-Aid.
Well, you drink your own Kool-Aid, you really believe it. It's just, to me, it's a recipe for disaster. So be open-minded to learning. I like to associate myself with successful people. And I think that's a great tip for young people to do. I think older people, and I'm counting myself amongst those, actually do like to give young people advice, because it's quite cool, because you don't have age on your time. So it's quite cool to just dispense that knowledge. And knowledge can come in direct conversation, but knowledge can come in multiple other forms. I mean, there are podcasts and there are things that you can watch. I mean, this would even be an example. To learn
autobiographies you can read. And,
correct. To learn
biographies.
I mean, it's like, I love that sort of Robin Sharma said, it's like having coffee with Gandhi. And he said, you can read Gandhi's book and you can literally, it's as if you're having coffee with him. So you can read and learn and listen and earpod. And while you're running, you can gain information. You can see where other people got it wrong. I think that, another piece of advice, like, you can do all that and you can have an opinion. People should have an opinion. And so, that would be roughly many of the things that I would say to people. Young people, look at trends, see where things are going. Don't sell yourself. Even people often sell their business story to themselves, and this is definitely going to work, and bounce it off people, test it, and have doubt, but have the confidence not to listen to the naysayers and the doubters.
What so far in your journey with Inospace was your proudest moment?
I think, there've been several, but the proudest moment for me actually was that large transaction which did in COVID, and it was
doubling the size of the business.
Well, that was like, it's like, wow, like, and I remember the day I signed that transaction. It was like, my mind sort of flirted back to 2012 when I was on the front page of the newspapers, and they were, there was a journalist there trying to, position me as Bernie Madoff for the biggest rip-off artist in the world. So, and I was told you'll never get back into business, and I will never support you. And it was like, wow, I just signed a 1.25 billion rand deal, which was an acquisition. It wasn't just like I was an agent. It was like, actually, I've signed it. Standard Bank put in a R1 billion behind the business. That was a very proud moment for me. But it was actually more proud. I was more proud about it because actually when COVID came, I didn't actually flinch. I did stare down the impending doom right in the eye, and I said, bring it on, baby. So for me, that it was actually overcoming that was a big issue. I mean, another proud moment for me actually at the time was, a lot of companies totally panicked, and we did too, actually. And the people around me panicked, and they said, look, reduce our staff, bring it down. And I said, just hold on a second. Let's just give this a few months, calm down, which is one of my pieces of advice, actually, in my 18 rules. It's actually calm the fuck down. And even if you can't, just pretend to.
It's Douglas Adams.
Correct.
Don't panic.
Don't panic. And so that was a proud moment. Actually, every time I see an Inospace sign go up another building, it is a very proud moment for me. So realizing that actually, you can build something new, and realizing that no matter what disaster comes your way, you can do it is a proud moment for me.
Of course, hindsight's always 20/20, and there are millions of things where had I known, I would have. And of course, there must be many of them for Inospace. But if you had to pick the top one, what is the one thing, if you had to go back from when you were starting, that you wish you had known earlier?
Well, I mean, I was telling one of our shareholders the other day, and we were talking about a specific building in Cape Town, and I said, we should have never sold the building, because we sold it 2 years ago and the price has gone up by 50 or 60%. And he's a really smart guy, and he said to me, well, actually, no, we should have sold the building, but we should have bought Bitcoins at $30,000 a Bitcoin at the time. And I think his message was to me, is not about the Bitcoin. The message is that we make decisions at that moment, and we think those decisions are right, and we can sit back and reanalyze every single thing we've done. I've always tried not to look at the rearview mirror. I think you just get depressed doing that.
What's done is done. Try to learn from it.
Correct. And so to answer your question, I think one of the big learnings was, certainly in real estate, it's like, often I was in too much of a rush to sell. We've sold some great buildings. I think it's to do that, and I think it's actually to really actually grab opportunity quicker than when it comes, and not to be scared. And I have been in it. Like, a lot of people go, oh, you must have been like look, through risk out the window. Not all. In fact, I often drive around and I'm like that old Jew who drives around and says, oh God, I should have bought that one, and I should have bought that one, and I should have bought Bitcoin, and I should have done Ethereum, and I should have done this, and I should have done that. But the truth is, actually, I think that we have, our lives are not permanent. We all reach an end of a stage, an end of a cycle. And I think it's like when you see opportunity, just grab it and go for it. And I've regretted not doing that, actually.
So from what I understand, you're pretty optimistic about South Africa. What do you see in the landscape happening over the next couple of years for business builders, founders?
So look, I am optimistic about South Africa because I think actually optimism is a choice, and I think no matter where you are, you should be optimistic. Because if you're pessimistic, just pack your bags and go. No matter where you are, by the way. So if you're pessimistic about the Netherlands, then don't hang around in the Netherlands. We live in a world which is very mobile today. But I am optimistic about South Africa, and I live in a world where I have thought about this, since I was a kid. Should we be living somewhere else, and should we be going somewhere else? And I think that really South Africa has got a great energy. I think that this country's got 55 million people. In many ways, it's been mismanaged, in my view, often actually at the lowest level. But I'm optimistic because we sit at a very interesting place. I think it can only get better. And I think it's an easy place to compete. And, I, like many people, I've been in London. I found it boring. I found it systematic. I found access to people much better. I think South Africans are actually nice people. We are.
I tend to agree.
We're friendly people, and across all demographics, across all racial groups. We have actually lived through a momentous change here. I think we've got things which other countries don't. I think we have tenacity. I think we have the ability to look fear in the eyes and say, we can get better. It is no surprise to me that the world's wealthiest man grew up in Pretoria. Because that's South Africans. I was particularly optimistic about Cape Town because I think if you live in Cape Town, you just see what's been happening over here. But now I've actually got optimism about other parts of the country. I think they will grow. I think it will certainly change. But I certainly think as a young person, it's a great place to have a future, and because it's a great place because you actually don't have that much competition, because it is actually open for business, and it is still a country where you can have a rags for riches story. And I think that South Africans are sensible, and South Africans actually can really actually have a great future in a great country.
Where could people learn more about Inospace?
I think the probably best place is to go on the sites and go look at those businesses which are operating. I mean, again, it's an extremely proud moment for me when every single time I go into one of these Inospace parks and I see hundreds and now thousands of businesses operating. So, you can go look at it. I mean, obviously you can go look on we can put on GPT, or we can put on Grok, or what. There is a lot of information around. Information today is actually freely available, and then you can just ask. I mean, I have people asking me all day long.
Just go to the website.
And go to the website. But people actually ask me all day long, what do you want to do about this? What do you want to do about that? I mean, we live in a very accessible world. Like anyone is actually pretty accessible today. So yeah, go look, walk around, learn, ask, steal with your eyes, get information.
Sounds great. Rael, I want to say thank you very much for joining us in Companies of Cape Town today. It was a lot of fun, and I've learned a whole bunch.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.